Imani Jackson knew her first day would be rough. It always was. New school, new stairs, new whispers. But nothing prepared her for the way the air changed the moment she walked into Roosevelt High. The polished floors, manicured lawns, and carefully curated diversity posters on the walls couldn't hide the undercurrent. They looked at her like she was an unexpected storm rolling in from a neighborhood they'd only heard about on the news. Her accent? Bronx. Her hair? Braided and wrapped in gold thread. Her clothes? Functional, confident, unapologetically hers. That was all it took. Not even 2 hours into the day, a teacher asked if she was lost, mistaking her for a visitor from a youth outreach program. In chemistry, her lab partner asked if she'd ever used a microscope before. Smiles never reached anyone's eyes. Jokes came layered in polite tones, harmless to the untrained ear but barbed if you knew what to listen for. And Imani had learned early to listen. Third period lunch was a battlefield of silence. Tables were carved along invisible lines. Athletes, scholars, socialites, everyone had their place. Imani didn't. So she found the end of a table no one claimed and pulled out a chair. That's when she heard it. A voice louder than the rest. Confident, smug. Trevor Knox. He was the type that got away with everything. Tall, golden hair, captain of the wrestling team, a legacy student whose father funded the new gym. His friends called him T-Knox. He called Imani Street Queen the moment she passed him in the hallway earlier. Now he stood with his tray, blocking her view of the room, smirking like the joke was already halfway done. "You sure you're in the right school?" he asked, balancing his lunch with the ease of someone who never had to clean up after himself. "Didn't think they bust kids in from Grand Theft Auto anymore." Laughter from his friends. Imani didn't flinch. She met his eyes. Calm. Controlled. "You're real comfortable until someone calls you out," she said, biting into her apple, refusing to give him more. Trevor's smile thinned. "You trying to act tough?" "No," she said without looking at him again. "Just trying to eat my lunch. Try it sometime." "You talk too much." Gasps rippled like static. Trevor froze. No one talked back to him, not like that. But Imani didn't care. She wasn't here to play by their rules. The next few days were more of the same, only now worse. Someone accidentally spilled water on her backpack. Another forgot to tell her the assignment had changed. She found herself isolated, observed, underestimated. But she walked through each day with her head up, because weakness was a language she'd never learned. Then came Friday. She was on her way to class, earbuds in, humming a beat her brother Jaleel had sent her the night before. Her steps were steady, her hoodie pulled low over her forehead. As she rounded the corner near the gym, her phone buzzed. She reached into her pocket, only to be shoved hard against a locker. Trevor. He stood there, chest puffed, friends recording from a few feet away. The hallway emptied fast, like a show was about to start. Imani looked down at her phone, which had clattered to the floor. "What's your problem?" she asked, voice cold. Trevor got in close. "You think you're special or something. You don't belong here." Imani blinked, and in that blink, she wasn't in the hallway anymore. She was back home. 5 brothers in the backyard. Wooden mats. Calloused hands. Echoes of "keep your stance. Eyes up. Control the breath." She'd grown up surrounded by warriors. Not the kind with swords, the kind that carried generations of strength in every quiet movement. She exhaled. And moved. In one fluid motion, she stepped aside, grabbed his wrist, pivoted her body, and Trevor hit the floor before anyone could process what had happened. Hard. His phone flew. His ego shattered. Imani didn't stop there. She slid back into a neutral stance as Trevor tried to lurch up. A clean sweep knocked his legs out again. He groaned. Cameras flashed. Someone screamed. 10 seconds. That's all it took. She didn't say a word. Just picked up her phone and walked away, leaving Trevor groaning like a deflated balloon on the tile. The video spread within hours. First to group chat. Then Snapchat. Then TikTok. By dinner, she was trending. But what happened next wasn't victory. It was a trap. The school called her mother. The principal demanded a meeting. Violent behavior, they said. Escalated conflict. Trevor's parents were fuming, talking lawyers and suspensions. No mention of the shove. No acknowledgement of the video. Just a brown girl with a history we're unfamiliar with, and a threat to school safety. Imani sat in the office with her jaw clenched. They wanted her to apologize. She was the one who was attacked, but they needed her to say sorry. She refused. Is it school policy to punish self-defense? She asked. Or just when someone like me defends herself? Silence. They said they'd review the footage. She already knew what that meant. She'd be blamed either way. But what they didn't expect was what came next. Students started reposting the video with captions like "Queen moves," "Teach him a lesson," and "She got Bronx in her blood." A few even wrote essays on bias and self-defense. The footage was undeniable. Even the local news caught wind of it. Still, the principal said they'd decide Monday. Imani wasn't afraid. Not of them. She'd faced worse in streets rougher than these shiny hallways. But what she didn't know yet, what even she couldn't see coming, was that her 10 seconds of instinct would echo far beyond those walls. That what she did in the face of ignorance and arrogance would spark something louder, stronger, and more lasting than she could ever imagine. Because the Bronx raised her right. And Trevor? Trevor had just made the mistake of his life. The weekend was a storm. Not the kind you hear coming, but the kind that sweeps through and changes everything in its path. The video of Imani swiftly taking down Trevor went viral overnight, and the school's carefully maintained image began to crack. Social media was on fire. Hashtags like #ImaniUnstoppable and #BronxGirlPower trended, flooding timelines with comments ranging from admiration to outright hostility. While some celebrated her strength and courage, others, mostly those in power or privilege, sought to control the narrative. School administrators scrambled to contain the fallout. Parents demanded discipline. Trevor's father called the school demanding a proper response. Meanwhile, students whispered rumors, split into factions defending or condemning Imani. The halls that once echoed with silent judgment now buzzed with tension. Imani stayed silent at first, aware of the storm brewing but unwilling to be the lightning rod. At home, her mother urged caution, but Imani's brothers pushed her to stand tall. Jaleel, the eldest and fiercest, reminded her that strength wasn't just about muscle but about owning her truth. Monday morning, the principal called her into the office. The room was thick with the weight of consequences. Instead of the expected suspension, she was met with something far more complicated: an offer. They wanted her to appear on a local TV news segment to discuss the incident and promote conflict resolution. The offer was wrapped in corporate language, but Imani saw through it immediately. It was a calculated move to spin the story in their favor, to soothe the upset parents, and to control public perception. Imani paused. Speaking out on television wasn't part of her plan, but maybe this was a chance, not to play by their rules but to rewrite them. Her first interview was rough. The anchors tried to steer her toward apologizing, toward downplaying the violence. But Imani spoke with a calm, unflinching voice about self-defense, about respect, and about standing up against bullying and discrimination. She talked about her 5 brothers and the martial arts lessons that had given her more than physical strength: discipline, focus, resilience. Viewers responded. Messages poured in from all over the city, some from kids who had been bullied, some from parents desperate for their children to feel safe. Others reached out with harsh words, steeped in prejudice and fear. But the impact was undeniable. Imani wasn't just a viral video anymore, she was becoming a symbol. Back at school, the landscape began shifting in subtle ways. Teachers who had ignored subtle discrimination before now called her over during breaks, offering encouragement. Students who had kept their distance began to approach cautiously, some with respect, others with curiosity. Trevor Knox, bruised in more ways than one, avoided the hallways where she walked. His bravado cracked, but pride kept him silent. Imani knew this wasn't just about one fight. It was about every time she'd been underestimated, dismissed, or boxed into a stereotype because of her skin color or where she came from. It was about every girl told to keep quiet, every kid told to accept the unfairness. And she wasn't about to let those lessons be in vain. A few days later, a group of students asked her to start a self-defense club. It wasn't just about fighting back. It was about empowerment, about giving everyone the tools to protect themselves physically and emotionally. Imani agreed. What started as a small after-school gathering quickly grew, pulling in kids from different backgrounds and social groups. It became a safe space where stories were shared, strength was built, and respect was earned. The school board was forced to take notice. The story made headlines beyond the city. Advocacy groups reached out, recognizing the cultural shift Imani was inspiring, a move toward equality, inclusion, and empathy. For once, the narrative wasn't about punishment or division but about growth and leadership. Imani's role expanded quickly. She was invited to speak at youth centers, community forums, even on a national talk show. Her message was simple. Resilience was not about revenge but about transformation. Her pain was not a weakness but a legacy, one she was determined to turn into inspiration. Her family watched with pride, but they also reminded her of the work ahead. The world wasn't changing overnight. Prejudice and discrimination still lingered in quiet corners. But Imani's story was proof that one moment of courage could ripple outward, creating waves no amount of silence could drown. Meanwhile, Trevor's story became a cautionary tale. His behavior and subsequent silence reflected a deeper problem, the entitlement bred by legacy and privilege. Yet, even in his defeat, there was a chance for accountability. Some teachers reached out to him, pushing for reflection and growth. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the first step. Imani's journey was about more than fighting a bully. It was about confronting a system that allowed bullying to thrive. About calling out the biases that kept some students invisible and others untouchable. About building bridges where walls had stood. The school slowly began to embrace this cultural shift. Diversity and inclusion programs expanded. Teachers received training on implicit bias. Students formed alliances across social lines. The Self-Defense Club was just the beginning, a spark that ignited conversations about equality and respect. Imani herself changed. The girl who had walked the halls alone was now a mentor, a leader, a voice for those who felt unheard. She learned that heroism wasn't just about strength in a fight, it was about accountability, forgiveness, and inspiring others to rise. Her story became a legacy. Not because she was perfect, but because she was real, flawed, fierce, and unafraid. She showed that transformation was possible, even in the most unlikely places. And while the fight had started with 10 seconds of instinct, it became a movement that no one could ignore. A reminder that courage, when combined with purpose, could rewrite the rules of the game. Imani wasn't just the girl from the Bronx anymore. She was a symbol of resilience, leadership, and hope for every kid who'd ever been told they didn't belong. And that was just the beginning. The aftermath of the viral fight brought more than just fleeting fame. It forced the school community to confront uncomfortable truths about prejudice and the way bullying had been tolerated for too long. Imani's strength was undeniable, but the deeper issue was systemic discrimination, how stereotypes and bias shaped interactions between students, teachers, and administrators. Suddenly, conversations no longer skirted around race and inequality, they had to be faced head-on. Teachers who had once turned a blind eye to subtle harassment were called out. They were no longer able to dismiss complaints as kids being kids. School policy meetings grew heated, as faculty and staff debated how to foster an environment of true inclusion and respect. Many admitted their ignorance or unconscious biases, sparking a wave of self-reflection and professional development workshops designed to dismantle prejudices embedded in the system. Students, too, felt the shift. Groups that had formed cliques began to mix, prompted by the Self-Defense Club's message of unity and empowerment. Imani's leadership was pivotal here. Her presence bridged social and cultural divide. She made it clear that strength wasn't a weapon to divide but a tool to uplift. The club became a microcosm of what the school could become: diverse, inclusive, and supportive. The fight also spotlighted how quickly assumptions could spiral. Trevor, previously seen as just a tough kid, revealed deeper insecurities and pressures from a family that prized dominance and toughness above all. His father's insistence on maintaining status blinded Trevor to his own need for growth and accountability. Behind the bravado was a young man grappling with identity and expectations, trapped in a cycle of aggression fueled by cultural norms of toxic masculinity. Imani, however, refused to demonize him. She recognized that real change required empathy and leadership, not just retaliation. When Trevor finally approached her to talk, it wasn't with threats but with awkward apologies. Their conversation was a turning point, neither absolved nor forgiven, but honest and necessary. Imani challenged Trevor to confront his prejudices and actions, urging him to become part of the solution rather than the problem. This moment was a catalyst for the school's broader cultural transformation. Student councils began prioritizing equity, organizing forums on discrimination, and advocating for policies that supported marginalized voices. The administration responded by revising codes of conduct to emphasize restorative justice over punishment, encouraging dialogue and growth instead of fear and exclusion. Imani's advocacy work extended beyond the school walls. Invitations to community centers, youth organizations, and local government panels multiplied. She spoke about resilience, not just the physical ability to defend oneself, but the mental and emotional strength required to overcome systemic barriers. Her message resonated widely, especially in neighborhoods struggling with violence and disenfranchisement. Her approach was rooted in mentorship. Imani believed that empowering young people meant more than teaching self-defense techniques. It meant nurturing confidence, critical thinking, and leadership skills. She started training workshops that paired martial arts with discussions about identity, cultural pride, and social justice. These sessions became incubators for new leaders, inspiring youth to channel their experiences into advocacy and positive change. At the heart of Imani's growth was a profound understanding of legacy. She was not just fighting for herself but for the generations before her and those who would come after. Her family history, 5 older brothers who taught her strength, her mother's sacrifices, the struggles of her community, were the foundation of her resilience. This legacy fueled her determination to break cycles of prejudice and violence. The school's changing culture was reflected in daily interactions. Instances of overt racism and bullying declined as empathy and inclusion took root. Students from diverse backgrounds shared spaces and stories, building friendships that challenged long-standing divisions. Teachers reported more engagement and a deeper sense of belonging among students. Yet challenges remained. The cultural shift was uneven and met with resistance from some quarters. A few parents and staff clung to old attitudes, uncomfortable with the focus on race and equity. These tensions sparked important debates about who deserved to shape the school's future and what values should guide it. Imani's story became a lightning rod, illustrating the power and discomfort of change. Through it all, Imani's own journey continued. She grappled with balancing her newfound public role with the realities of everyday life. Schoolwork, family responsibilities, and the weight of expectation tested her resilience. But she remained grounded by the lessons her brothers had taught her: discipline, humility, and the courage to lead by example. Her growing influence attracted allies. Local activists, educators, and even some former skeptics joined forces with her, amplifying the push for systemic reforms. Together, they advocated for better funding for programs supporting diversity and mental health, recognizing that empowerment required addressing deeper social inequalities. The ripple effects reached the city's wider conversation about race, justice, and youth empowerment. Imani's story was a beacon, showing how one individual's courage could spark collective awakening. Media coverage evolved from sensationalism to substantive dialogue, highlighting initiatives born from her leadership. In the midst of this transformation, Imani found time to reflect on forgiveness, not the naive kind that erases harm, but a deliberate choice to release bitterness and embrace growth. Forgiveness became a personal tool for healing, enabling her to move forward without being trapped by anger or resentment. Her message to young people was clear: adversity could be the spark that ignited strength. True heroism lay in standing up not just for yourself but for others, championing equality, challenging prejudice, and inspiring change. Through advocacy and action, the pain of the past could be transformed into a future defined by hope and inclusion. The school that once feared the viral video now embraced Imani as a catalyst for positive change. Her self-defense club was a model for other schools, and her mentorship programs attracted attention from national organizations focused on youth development. The narrative had shifted from one of victimhood and punishment to one of empowerment and leadership. Imani's story reminded everyone that resilience wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving and transforming. Her journey from the Bronx to becoming a youth advocate illustrated the power of embracing identity, confronting injustice, and leading with empathy. Her legacy was still unfolding, but the foundations were strong. A community learning to listen, a culture beginning to change, and a generation inspired to rise above the limitations imposed by prejudice. In those moments of challenge and change, one thing was certain: Imani's fight was never just about 10 seconds on the school grounds. It was about a lifelong commitment to equality, courage, and transformation that no bully or system could ever erase. The viral moment thrust Imani into an unexpected spotlight, but it also revealed the sharp divide between public perception and the nuanced reality of her life. Media outlets were quick to label her a fighter and badass, but Imani knew her story was about much more than a single fight. It was about resilience, identity, and the fight against deep-rooted prejudice. She began using every opportunity to reshape the narrative, emphasizing empowerment and self-respect rather than glorifying violence. Imani's growing platform came with intense scrutiny. Some questioned whether her swift response to bullying was appropriate, while others stereotyped her based on race and background. Online trolls surfaced, echoing the very prejudices the school was trying to combat. But instead of retreating, Imani leaned into advocacy, using these challenges to highlight the very issues of discrimination and cultural misunderstanding that fueled conflict. She realized that true empowerment required systemic change, not just individual victories. With that understanding, she collaborated with teachers and administrators to develop programs focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. These weren't just workshops but ongoing initiatives aimed at changing attitudes and behaviors. The school began integrating curriculum elements that explored cultural history, social justice, and the impact of bias, encouraging students to critically examine their assumptions. The Self-Defense Club became a safe space where students from all backgrounds came together, breaking down barriers that had long divided them. It wasn't about fighting each other. It was about building confidence and learning to stand up to all forms of intimidation, physical, verbal, and systemic. Imani fostered an environment where vulnerability was met with support, and leadership was shared. Her style was direct but compassionate, challenging members to hold themselves and each other accountable. Imani's leadership style resonated beyond her immediate circle. Local community leaders invited her to speak at events focused on youth empowerment and violence prevention. She shared stories not just of her fight but of the broader social dynamics at play, how discrimination and prejudice often underlie bullying and aggression. Her frankness and clarity helped audiences understand that solutions required empathy and structural change. Her efforts sparked a cultural shift within the school district. District-wide policies were revised to emphasize restorative justice, focusing on reconciliation and growth instead of punishment alone. Teachers received training to recognize and combat implicit bias, and resources were allocated to support mental health and conflict resolution programs. The school board publicly acknowledged the need for ongoing vigilance against discrimination, signaling a new commitment to equity. At the same time, Imani's personal journey deepened. She confronted her own biases and misconceptions, recognizing that growth meant constantly challenging oneself. Mentorship from her older brothers continued to shape her, providing a foundation of discipline and humility. They encouraged her to view leadership not as dominance but as responsibility, lifting others while staying grounded. Imani's story also inspired other students to step forward with their own experiences. A culture of openness began to replace fear and silence. Students who had once felt marginalized found their voices and started initiatives addressing mental health, racial justice, and gender equality. The school transformed from a place where difference bred division into a community where diversity was celebrated. The ripple effects reached parents and caregivers as well. Workshops and forums invited families to engage in conversations about culture, identity, and the impact of prejudice. These dialogues fostered greater understanding and support at home, reinforcing the lessons learned at school. Community partnerships formed, connecting students to local resources and mentors who could help sustain their growth. Imani's advocacy emphasized that empowerment is multidimensional. It involves physical safety, emotional well-being, and the dismantling of barriers that limit opportunity. She championed policies and practices that ensured students of all backgrounds had equal access to resources, leadership roles, and educational opportunities. Her work illustrated how equity isn't about treating everyone the same but about recognizing and addressing systemic disadvantages. Her journey wasn't without setbacks. Resistance from some quarters tested her resolve, but she viewed these challenges as part of the broader struggle for justice. She remained focused on long-term goals, grounded by a belief that transformation requires persistence and collective effort. Imani's leadership grew beyond the school and local community. She connected with youth advocacy groups, sharing best practices and learning from others' experiences. These networks strengthened her ability to influence policy and inspire change on a wider scale. She became a role model not only for self-defense but for courageous leadership in the face of adversity. Throughout her journey, forgiveness remained central. She understood that holding on to anger only perpetuated harm. Forgiving those who had underestimated or mistreated her was an act of reclaiming power and peace. This approach encouraged others to heal and build bridges, fostering a culture where mistakes became opportunities for learning rather than permanent divisions. Imani's transformation inspired many, but she never lost sight of the broader mission. Her fight was never just about one bully or one school. It was about challenging systems that perpetuate inequality and empowering young people to rise above limitations imposed by prejudice. The legacy she began to build was one of resilience, leadership, and hope. By turning pain into purpose, she demonstrated that true strength lies in lifting others and changing the world for the better. Her story was a testament to the power of courage, empathy, and unwavering commitment to justice. In the end, Imani's impact extended far beyond the viral moment that started it all. It became a movement toward inclusion and equality, sparking a cultural shift that would shape her community for generations. Her leadership showed that when young people are given the tools and support to thrive, they can transform even the darkest moments into catalysts for profound change. The aftermath of the viral fight sparked widespread conversations about accountability, not just for the bully, but for the entire school environment that allowed such conflicts to escalate. The school administration initially considered a standard suspension for the bully, but the incident exposed deeper, systemic failures. bullying policies that were reactive rather than preventive, staff unprepared to address racial prejudice, and a lack of meaningful support for students dealing with discrimination. Imani's story put pressure on the administration to do more than just punish. It demanded they take responsibility for the school culture they helped shape. The principal formed a task force including teachers, students, parents, and community leaders to review disciplinary policies and recommend reforms. This collaborative approach underscored a new commitment to shared accountability, recognizing that lasting change requires everyone's participation. The bully, Marcus, was not simply a bad kid. His aggression stemmed from a complicated background: neglect, pressure to conform to toxic masculinity ideals, and unaddressed trauma. Rather than ostracize him, the school decided to integrate restorative justice practices, bringing Marcus face to face with the impact of his actions and giving him a chance to repair harm. This process wasn't easy. Marcus initially resisted, angry and defensive. But through guided dialogue, he began to understand how his behavior contributed to a cycle of fear and division. Imani, though initially hesitant, agreed to participate in these restorative sessions. She approached it not with bitterness but with a commitment to leadership and growth. By confronting Marcus directly, she reclaimed her power without stooping to revenge. Her courage inspired others to see accountability as a path toward healing rather than punishment alone. At the same time, Imani took on the role of mentor to younger students facing similar challenges. She developed workshops on conflict resolution, communication, and self-defense, not just physical, but verbal and emotional too. These workshops emphasized respect for diversity and inclusion, teaching students to stand up for themselves and others while fostering empathy and understanding. Her mentorship grew organically into a youth advocacy network, connecting students across the district who wanted to address bullying, discrimination, and social injustice. The network provided resources and support, empowering students to organize campaigns, forums, and projects that celebrated cultural diversity and challenged prejudice head-on. Imani's advocacy also reached local policymakers. She spoke at town hall meetings and school board sessions, pushing for funding and legislation that supported comprehensive anti-bullying programs and mental health resources. Her voice added urgency to conversations that were often overlooked or delayed. By sharing her story and those of others, she framed bullying as not just an individual issue but a societal one requiring collective responsibility. The community's response was mixed. Some embraced the changes eagerly, recognizing the need for a cultural shift. Others resisted, uncomfortable with confronting ingrained biases or reallocating resources. Imani and her allies met this resistance with persistence and openness, continuing to engage skeptics through dialogue and education. These efforts sparked measurable progress. Surveys showed a decrease in reported bullying incidents, and students reported feeling safer and more supported. Teachers felt better equipped to recognize and address discrimination in the classroom. The school environment gradually transformed into one where differences were respected rather than feared. Imani's leadership demonstrated the importance of resilience in advocacy. Change was slow and often frustrating, but her refusal to give up inspired others to stay engaged. She understood that accountability meant ongoing effort, not a one-time fix. This mindset influenced students, staff, and community members alike, fostering a culture of continuous growth. The process also highlighted the critical role of forgiveness in accountability. Forgiving Marcus did not excuse his actions but allowed space for genuine transformation. Marcus, too, began to grow. He took responsibility publicly, apologized sincerely, and committed to being a better person. His journey from antagonist to ally underscored the power of restorative justice in breaking cycles of harm. Imani's story challenged traditional notions of heroism. Her heroism wasn't about physical dominance or viral fame. It was about vulnerability, leadership, and the courage to foster understanding in a divided world. She showed that real strength lies in lifting others and embracing complexity rather than simplifying people into heroes and villains. Her advocacy work inspired other schools to adopt similar approaches. District-wide initiatives were launched, focusing on mentorship programs, diversity training, and restorative practices. The ripple effect of her leadership extended far beyond the initial incident, influencing educational policy and community relations. Imani remained grounded, balancing her advocacy with personal growth. She pursued education passionately, seeking knowledge to better understand social justice, psychology, and leadership. She became a role model not because she was perfect but because she embodied growth, resilience, and authenticity. Her journey also revealed the power of community. The support from her family, friends, mentors, and allies sustained her through challenges. This network reinforced that no one can create lasting change alone. Collective strength and solidarity were essential. The legacy Imani began to build wasn't just about addressing bullying, it was about transforming systems that perpetuate inequality and prejudice. Her work showed that true equality requires confronting uncomfortable truths and committing to justice in every aspect of life. As she continued advocating, Imani expanded her vision to include broader social issues: racial justice, gender equality, mental health awareness, and youth empowerment. She understood that these issues intersect, and addressing them holistically was crucial for lasting transformation. Imani's leadership inspired a new generation to believe in their power to effect change. Her story became a beacon of hope and a blueprint for those facing similar struggles. It emphasized that empowerment is not a destination but a journey of ongoing learning, accountability, and compassion. In the end, the fight that sparked her rise was only the beginning. Imani's true victory lay in how she transformed pain into purpose, division into unity, and adversity into opportunity. Her story is a testament to the power of leadership rooted in empathy, courage, and a relentless pursuit of justice. Imani's rise as a youth advocate brought her face to face with the realities of cultural shifts, both the excitement of progress and the friction of resistance. Her growing influence exposed entrenched beliefs that hadn't been challenged before, revealing how deep prejudice and misunderstanding can run even in communities that claimed to value diversity. She learned quickly that advocacy wasn't about winning every battle, but about persistence, patience, and strategic engagement. She began speaking at regional conferences, connecting with educators, social workers, and activists who shared her vision. These gatherings were a fertile ground for exchanging ideas on how to foster inclusion and equality in schools. Imani's story was a powerful case study, proof that change was possible when courage met opportunity. She stressed that real transformation required more than policies on paper. It demanded shifts in attitudes, language, and everyday interactions. Imani worked to expand her self-defense club into a broader youth empowerment organization. This group combined physical training with workshops on leadership, emotional intelligence, and community engagement. The curriculum was designed to cultivate resilience and inspire young people to become agents of change. It wasn't just about fighting back. It was about building a foundation of confidence, empathy, and social responsibility. Her approach was holistic. She invited guest speakers from diverse backgrounds, artists, scholars, entrepreneurs, and activists, to share their experiences. This diversity of voices enriched the group's perspective and helped break down stereotypes. Members learned to appreciate the power of inclusion and the importance of standing in solidarity with those facing discrimination. As the organization grew, so did its impact. They launched campaigns addressing not only bullying but also broader issues like racial profiling, gender bias, and mental health stigma. Imani understood that advocacy must address the intersectionality of identity and injustice. Ignoring the complexity of people's experiences would only perpetuate exclusion. In schools, Imani's work encouraged student councils to become more inclusive and representative. She helped establish peer mentorship programs, pairing older students with younger ones to provide guidance and support. These programs created a culture where leadership was accessible and where diversity was a strength rather than a challenge. Imani also partnered with local law enforcement and mental health professionals to facilitate workshops on communication and conflict resolution. These collaborations fostered trust and understanding between students and authority figures, breaking down barriers that often led to misunderstanding and fear. Building these bridges was essential for creating safe and supportive environments. Her advocacy extended beyond schools into the community. She engaged with parents and local organizations, emphasizing the role everyone plays in shaping culture. These outreach efforts highlighted the importance of family involvement and community solidarity in promoting equality and justice. Imani's efforts began to influence policy discussions at the district and city levels. Her ability to articulate the needs and experiences of youth gave weight to calls for increased funding and legislative support for inclusive programs. Policymakers took notice of her balanced approach, firm on principles but open to dialogue and collaboration. Despite these successes, Imani faced challenges. Not everyone welcomed change. Some accused her of stirring division or exaggerating problems. These criticisms tested her resilience but also sharpened her ability to respond thoughtfully and effectively. She learned to frame her message in ways that emphasized common goals and mutual respect. Imani's leadership style evolved to emphasize empathy and inclusivity. She recognized that real progress required listening to differing perspectives and finding common ground. This approach did not dilute her commitment to justice but strengthened her ability to build coalitions and sustain momentum. Her personal growth was equally significant. She continued to pursue education, exploring fields like sociology, psychology, and social policy to deepen her understanding of systemic issues. This knowledge empowered her to develop more nuanced strategies and mentor others more effectively. Throughout, Imani remained connected to her root. Her family's support was a constant source of strength. The lessons from her brothers, discipline, humility, and perseverance, remained guiding principles. She credited them with grounding her through the highs and lows of advocacy. Imani's story inspired a new generation of youth leaders who saw her as a model for turning adversity into opportunity. She mentored emerging advocates, helping them navigate challenges and build their own platforms. This ripple effect expanded the movement for equality and inclusion beyond her immediate sphere. The cultural shift she helped ignite was subtle but profound. Conversations about race, identity, and justice became more open and nuanced within her community. People began to question long-held assumptions and embrace diversity as a source of strength. Schools adopted inclusive language and practices, signaling a shift toward belonging rather than exclusion. Imani's advocacy also influenced the media narrative around youth activism. She challenged stereotypes of young people as apathetic or rebellious, highlighting their capacity for leadership and change. Her own story was featured in local and national outlets, inspiring others to use their voices for justice. The transformation was ongoing. Imani knew the work was far from finished. Structural inequalities and biases persisted and new challenges arose. But the foundation she and her allies built created a framework for continued progress. The movement she was part of was growing stronger, fueled by collective hope and determination. Imani's journey illustrated that cultural shifts require courage to confront uncomfortable truths, resilience to withstand setbacks, and wisdom to foster dialogue. It showed that leadership rooted in empathy and inclusion can create environments where all voices are valued. Her impact reached beyond advocacy. She became a symbol of transformation, proof that individuals can influence culture and inspire communities to embrace equity. Imani's story encouraged others to believe in their power to shape a better future. As her platform expanded, Imani remained committed to authenticity. She rejected performative activism and focused on meaningful change grounded in lived experience. This integrity strengthened her credibility and deepened her connections with those she served. Imani's work also highlighted the importance of intersectionality, understanding how race, gender, class, and other identities intersect to shape experiences of discrimination and empowerment. This framework guided her advocacy, ensuring inclusivity and comprehensive support. She emphasized that empowerment is a journey involving personal growth, community engagement, and systemic change. Success requires challenging not only external barriers but internalized biases as well. Her leadership fostered a sense of shared responsibility. She encouraged others to see themselves as allies and advocates, capable of contributing to cultural transformation in everyday interactions. Imani's story is a testament to the power of youth-led movements. It illustrates how passion, knowledge, and strategic action can overcome prejudice and build inclusive communities. Her journey continues, inspiring ongoing efforts to create schools and societies where equality and justice are realities, not ideals. Through resilience, empathy, and leadership, Imani transformed a moment of conflict into a lifelong mission for cultural shift and social change. Imani's journey culminated in a legacy that rippled far beyond her initial conflict with the school bully. The viral moment that had thrust her into the spotlight was only the beginning. What followed was a transformative mission rooted in growth, mentorship, and unwavering dedication to equality. Her story became a beacon for those who had ever felt marginalized, a living proof that adversity could ignite profound change. She understood that true leadership was measured not by fame or recognition but by the ability to lift others. Imani invested heavily in mentorship, guiding young people from diverse backgrounds to find their voices and cultivate their strength. Her approach was deeply personal. She met each individual where they were, tailoring advice and support to foster both personal and collective growth. This mentorship nurtured a new generation of leaders, ready to continue the work of advocacy and cultural transformation. Imani championed the importance of education not only as a tool for individual advancement but as a critical pillar for societal change. She pushed for inclusive curricula that reflected the histories and contributions of all communities. By advocating for stories often left out of textbooks, she helped reshape how young people understood identity, prejudice, and justice. This shift in education promoted empathy and critical thinking, equipping students to challenge systemic inequalities. Her influence extended into policy realms where she collaborated with legislators, school boards, and community organizations. Imani's voice was instrumental in shaping initiatives aimed at reducing disciplinary disparities and promoting restorative justice practices in schools. She argued convincingly that punishment alone could never solve the root causes of bullying or discrimination. Healing and inclusion were necessary for lasting change. Imani also recognized the power of storytelling in building bridges across cultural divide. Through public speaking engagements, podcasts, and written essays, she shared her experiences and the lessons learned from her advocacy. Her narratives were candid and relatable, resonating deeply with audiences who saw their struggles reflected in her journey. This storytelling cultivated empathy on a broad scale, breaking down barriers of misunderstanding and fear. She was mindful that advocacy work could be exhausting and sometimes isolating. To sustain momentum, Imani emphasized the importance of community care and self-care. She promoted practices that nurtured mental health and resilience, reminding activists that they needed strength to keep pushing forward. This holistic view of activism created a more sustainable movement, where individuals supported one another through challenges and celebrated collective victories. Imani's legacy was also marked by a commitment to forgiveness and reconciliation. She spoke openly about the power of releasing resentment, not as a sign of weakness but as a strategic choice to focus energy on positive change. This perspective helped her navigate difficult encounters with detractors or those resistant to change. Forgiveness became a tool for healing divisions and fostering dialogue. Her story challenged conventional ideas about power and strength. Imani redefined heroism not as physical dominance but as the courage to stand up for justice, the humility to listen, and the resilience to persist. This reframing empowered many who felt powerless to see themselves as changemakers, shifting cultural perceptions about leadership and activism. Imani's work highlighted the importance of intersectionality, continually reminding communities that fighting for equality meant embracing all identities and experiences. She insisted that movements must be inclusive and attentive to the nuanced realities faced by different groups. This insistence pushed organizations to examine their own practices and strive for greater diversity and inclusion internally. The cultural impact of her advocacy was evident in the changing attitudes among youth and adults alike. Schools began to foster environments where differences were celebrated, bullying rates declined, and student voices were valued. Parents and educators reported more open conversations about race, identity, and justice, topics once considered taboo or uncomfortable. Imani's efforts also inspired innovations in how schools approached discipline and student engagement. Restorative justice circles, peer mediation programs, and equity training became more common, shifting the focus from punishment to understanding and growth. These changes contributed to safer and more supportive learning environments. She remained vigilant that progress required continual effort. Imani encouraged ongoing reflection and adaptation, cautioning against complacency. She viewed social justice as a dynamic process demanding new strategies as contexts evolved. Her adaptability and forward-thinking mindset ensured that her work remained relevant and impactful. Imani's legacy was cemented not only by her tangible achievements but by the intangible shift in hope and possibility she inspired. Young people who once felt silenced now believed their voices mattered. Communities previously divided found new ways to connect. The seeds of transformation she planted promised a future where equity and respect were foundational, not aspirational. Her journey underscored that meaningful change emerges from courage, resilience, and a commitment to uplift others. Imani's story is a reminder that individual actions, grounded in empathy and purpose, can spark movements that reshape societies. It exemplifies how pain and conflict, when met with strength and vision, can become catalysts for profound growth. Imani's continued advocacy and mentorship created a ripple effect, multiplying her impact exponentially. Those she empowered went on to lead initiatives in their own communities, spreading values of inclusion and justice. This network of emerging leaders carried forward the legacy of transformation, ensuring the movement's endurance. The cultural shifts she influenced extended beyond the classroom into workplaces, civic organizations, and broader society. Her insistence on equality and diversity informed conversations on representation, access, and opportunity across multiple sectors. Imani's leadership helped mainstream principles of social justice, moving them from margins to the center. She understood that true equality is not simply the absence of discrimination but the presence of systemic support and opportunity for all. Her advocacy embraced this holistic vision, pushing for policies and practices that addressed structural inequities alongside individual attitude. Imani's story also illustrated the critical role of allies in social justice work. She actively sought partnerships across racial, socioeconomic, and cultural lines, modeling how solidarity can strengthen movements. These collaborations expanded reach and influence, fostering a more united front against prejudice and injustice. Her example emphasized that growth, both personal and collective, is essential in the pursuit of equity. Imani encouraged ongoing learning, self-reflection, and humility, recognizing that no movement or individual is perfect. This openness created a culture where mistakes could be acknowledged and lessons embraced. Ultimately, Imani's legacy is one of transformation fueled by determination, empathy, and leadership. Her journey from a moment of confrontation to a lifetime of advocacy demonstrates the power of turning adversity into purpose. It challenges everyone to stand up, speak out, and act with courage in the face of injustice. Her story remains a powerful call to action, a testament that the wrong person underestimated at the wrong moment can become the catalyst for a movement that changes lives and communities forever.